Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Why Witness Evening News. I'm Lincoln Jesser.
And I'm Jen Kirk. We have an exciting newscast in store for all of you, with updates on the budget cuts and a discussion about sexism in the dress code.
But first, 12 delegates have been sent home for drinking, drugs, and violation of the ratio rule.
I bet you Honorable A.J. Blumenfeld wasn't too pleased about that. However, he was probably too busy with his morning press conference to worry much about it.
YNG was on the scene.
Hi, I'm Marquita Cottenham,
And I'm Catherine Dickerson.
and we're here at the governor's office for a press conference.
Here are the official announcements right from the governor himself.
In fact, about a little over 1,000 people received a text message from me informing them that this office had made our own budget for the conference, and the announcement was that it was a spending budget of $5 billion. And to clarify what that means is that there already is a budget in place, theoretically, that is the same from year to year, roughly, and that we're already committed to that kind of spending based on a certain amount of revenue that we expect to take in. The $5 billion is what we like to consider our growth. So we have $5 billion extra spending to do on top of what's already tied up in the budget. The budget being proposed for California that will be heard later today by the real assembly is something in the neighborhood of about $95 billion. So this is just a $5 billion purely for extra spending that's not already tied up elsewhere. We have a new addition to our program this year called Program Bills, and those are regarding changes to how we run our program, from how we run elections of candidates to the dress code, everything you can imagine. We invited delegations to, if they wanted to, as a kind of a pilot program, to create a program bill that would be heard last on the docket in any committee that finished with enough time. Apparently one went through. We call it PB, Program Bill 230, which proposes to ban all disposable campaign items at conferences. That will be heard hopefully today, but perhaps tomorrow in the Senate or Assembly, and then it'll move on to the other one if it does, and it will come to me. If I sign it, I will take it to the Program Committee, which is a committee of the Board of Directors of Cal YMCA Youth and Government, and I will advocate on its behalf to see if we can get something like that implemented starting as soon as possible.
Are there any candidates that do exemplify those qualities?
I think that they all are ready to do that. I think that they all have the aspects about them that makes them particularly strong, and that would make them appealing. That's why they're here in the first place, because they came from about a pool of 15 to 20 people, and an even greater pool, since I know individual delegations have to whittle down who they're going to run in the first place. So I think that they all obviously hold those qualities. I think it's just a matter of to what extent and where they apply their skills and how effective they can be in their, because I know that they're all earnest, they all want it, they all will be excellent in their ambition. It's just about, I think, their effectiveness. And I think that I'm very pleased with the options available to the delegates this year.
What are your plans for next year? Do you know where you want to go to college?
I have applied to 11 schools on the East Coast. All of them are on the East Coast, so geographically speaking, that's where I'll be next year. But as for the actual school, I don't know. I won't hear until April from them, and so it could be anywhere. Primarily, I've applied to a couple of schools in Washington, D.C., a couple of schools in Boston. I applied to NYU, so a lot of big cities and all on the East Coast. So that's where I know in my head I'll be. I just don't know where I'll be learning. So.
Next, we take a look at the Special Investigations Panel, which has undertaken the enormous task of revamping the California State Constitution. Jackie has more.
Hi, I'm Jackie Pack, here at the Capitol reporting from the Governor's Office. The Special Investigative Panel, also known as the SIP, is a very dynamic program area which has taken an entirely new direction compared to previous years. This year, the SIP is hosting a California Constitutional Convention, which provides Bright delegates with the opportunity to replace our state's current 286-page Constitution with a more detailed yet concise version. Today, our youth governor, A.J. Blumenfeld, came in to promote his personal platforms and to gain support from the delegates within the program.
So I have an opportunity to talk to you about what the SIP is doing this year. So why don't I tell you that I would say about 2 weeks after Bob won, so that brings us into November, I got an email from one of the delegation presidents asking me if there was any way we could expand the size of the SIP this year to include more delegates from more delegations. And I didn't understand why. I assumed that it was the same as it had been always year. My friends were in it last year and they liked it, and they didn't seem to say that there was, an excess of, that there was all this stuff that needed to get done and not enough people were doing it. And he said it was because they changed something and it's going to be really exciting this year. I'm sure you've heard about the changes. Well, someone left me out of the loop because I didn't hear about those changes that come late November. So I immediately talked to the program staff and asked them what it was about what about the program was changing that made it so appealing now all of a sudden, although of course it had always had a good following beforehand, but what made it so we needed to increase the size? And it was Rolf Davidson, some of you know him, who explained to me that you guys were rewriting the California Constitution. And a constitutional convention is just a very exciting thing in general, but let alone in the context of how we grow up in a society, in an American society where constitutional convention has a great amount of, it has an aura around it almost. It's the beginning of great things. I overall believe in an extremely limited government. I think that there's a whole lot that we can do for ourselves and our communities, and I don't think we have to be bound by law to do great things. And I think when you start trying to architect greatness from the perspective of legal documents and all this other mandated things that are handed down to us, you miss the mark. To say that is to pretend that there's a finite amount of issues, which there are simply not. So as long as there's an infinite amount of issues, how could you possibly base someone just on issue by issue? You have to know what they stand for. You have to believe in their principles and hope that their principles guide them in the same general direction as you. And if along the way they take a step in a different direction that you wouldn't, so be it. If your majority shall always prevail in their will, for their will to be right, it must be reasonable, and to diminish equal protection for equal rights for all people, no matter their place in a minority or a majority, would be oppression. And that's very true. We need to make sure that we are not oppressive just because we have a bigger group of friends than somebody else. One of the things I also mentioned, though, is that that's kind of our American culture, that we're lucky because other countries have not necessarily always had the same desired outcome as we've had in America. But I do think that our understanding of the Constitution Conventions and what it means to us culturally and historically is that when we come together to create something new, we are being incredibly productive by being a community and by being a unit. And that unity, from that unity, brings out the best in individuals. And those individuals can go on to do great things for themselves, but also for that community. So I think constitutional conventions are just that great forum for that kind of, that new beginning. I derive my passion for my proposals usually from a limitation of what I think to be excessive influence by the government, or refining how the government goes about serving its people, or providing more rights where the government has perhaps gotten in the way. So generally, it's me going through my daily life and saying, well, why can't I do this? I'm a human being. I was born into this world like anybody else. Why am I automatically subject to the wills of other people just because they say so, just because I live here, so I have to? And you have to weigh it against the public good versus whether, is there enough public good to warrant taking away from individuals? And if there's not, that's usually where my proposals come from, is saying, well, there's not, so let's give back that right, or let's get the government out of the way, or let's make sure the individual is protected.
So what drew you to join this program, and now that you're there, what's your favorite part about it?
My favorite part about SIP is that we're rewriting the Constitution, and I actually feel like I'm making a change with the program to the state of California, especially if some legislatures actually take a look at what we've done and take it to heart and use it in the future.